Right before we jump into this video, if you'd like to take better pictures in only 11 days, I created a free mini video course that you can sign up for right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/11 days. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a real-world review of the Canon 1DX Mark III. Now, I took it out into multiple situations and scenarios to give it the best push that I could in the real world. One of those is basketball, Temple Women's College basketball. I think I photographed 3 different games. Now, one of the reasons I did that is I wanted to shoot this camera as a DSLR, as a mirrorless camera, as a silent camera. I wanted to put it up against the Sony A9 II, and I also wanted to get out into a brightly lit situation, shoot at 100 ISO, and photograph Temple Women's Lacrosse. So we have a large selection of real-world images for you guys to download. The link is down below, and you can also download a lot of the full-res exported JPEGs, because it's one thing to show you the box moving around on the screen so you can see the focusing points when I am shooting in the mirrorless mode, but it's another to also include the images so that you can see, did it hit or did it miss? And the last thing I want to say before getting into the specs is that I reviewed this camera from a photographic standpoint. I did not test out the video features because all I really care about right now for this video is how did it work as a DSLR as well as a mirrorless camera. We may get to a real-world video review in the future, but right now we just wanted to start with this camera acting as a stills camera and not video. Now let's start with the specs of the 1DX Mark III, which is the flagship DSLR for Canon, and probably is the last flagship DSLR for Canon. It has a 20.1 megapixel full frame sensor with a new low pass filter. Now, it does not have IBIS. We didn't think that it would have IBIS because they've never had IBIS in any of their other cameras. So why would they have put it into this DSLR? It does not have it. It has a new Digic 10 processor, which is 3.1 times faster than the old Digic processors that were in the 1DX Mark II. And I can tell you that it does process super fast because you can watch as the focusing box locks onto the subject and tracks it in real time, and it does not lag behind like it does with some other cameras, namely the Z6 and the Z7. And I am well aware that the Z6 and Z7 are not on par with this, but I just wanted to use that as an example of what laggy looks like versus what laggy does not look like. Now is also a good time to tell you that we did put out 2 prior videos in regards to the 1DX Mark III that are linked down below. One of those is a video that showcases the autofocus capabilities, and the other one puts the 1DX Mark III up against the A9 II as you're looking through the viewfinder so you can watch how they track the same subject and which one does it better. Those are both linked down below. Now, in terms of ISO, we've got 100 to 102,400, and Canon is claiming that they get one stop better at higher ISO, where 6,400 in the old model looks like 12,800 in the new model. Next, there's a new and improved autofocusing system with 191 points, and 155 of those are cross-type. Now, that is when you're shooting it as a DSLR. Now, I did start off shooting the basketball game. You can see this picture right here. This was taken with the DSLR mode, meaning the mirror wasn't flipped up out of the way. And yeah, you got 191 autofocusing points, and they're all clumped in the middle. That's one of my main issues when it comes to a DSLR, is that all the focusing points are stuck in the middle. Now, Canon did institute some face tracking and subject tracking into this, and it did a pretty good job. So you can see right here on this image, super duper sharp. We are at, what are we at, 5,000 ISO on this one? We are at 6,400 ISO on this one, and it is nice and clean. Of course, when you zoom in, you're going to see some noise and grain, but you can download this RAW file and look at it yourself. But shooting sports at 6,400 at 1/1250th of a second, f2.8, everything worked perfectly fine when testing it out. No adapters are needed, but you have to use all EF lenses. You can't use any of the new RF RF lenses, of course, because this isn't designed for RF lenses. So after I photographed for a little while with this camera as a DSLR shooting at 16 frames a second, yeah, the mirror flips out of the way at 16 frames a second, which is really insane for a DSLR. But I wanted to see the mirrorless capabilities of this camera because that is the future. Canon spent a lot of time telling us how amazing the mirrorless capabilities of the camera are, and I wanted to put that to the test. Why? Because DSLRs are honestly a thing of the past, and mirrorless is here now and for the future. This is a future look of what you can expect from Canon pro-level cameras as they get into the mirrorless world. Now, speaking of the future, they've already said that the EOS R5 is going to shoot 20 frames per second. Now, the 1DX Mark III in mirrorless mode shoots at 20 frames per second with a mechanical shutter. It also shoots at 20 frames per second silent in full res RAW. Now, I mentioned that because the A9 II shoots 12 frames a second silent, but if you want to shoot it at 20 frames per second, you have to go to compressed RAW to get that 20 frames per second. And then if you run into issues like I'm going to show you right now, check this out. This is what banding looks like in the Sony. You can see this. Now, this isn't banding because the camera's having an issue. This is the LED board right here showing you on the floor what you're gonna pick up from the flickering of the lights. Now, let me go back one because this is what it looks like with the Canon. The Canon has the same issue if you're shooting 20 frames per second in silent mode, but if you go ahead and turn off silent mode and you shoot 20 frames per second mechanical still using the mirrorless mode, aka live view, you don't have that issue anymore. On the flip side, the Sony A9 II only gives you 10 frames per second with a mechanical shutter. In the future, we will have a side-by-side comparison between the 1DX Mark III and the Sony A9 II. Now, I want to show you how I shot this mirrorlessly. I used what is called a hoodman loop or a hoodman, whatever the heck they call this. I had this from way back in the day when we started shooting video with one of the older Nikons, and I needed to put this in the hot shoe. So this goes in the hot shoe, uses the LCD screen as your EVF, and it allows you to hold the camera more like a real camera and not just hold it out like this and try to use the LCD. Now, I don't personally recommend this hoodman loop or whatever it is. It works. It gets the job done. I don't even know if they make it anymore because it's like 150 bucks, or it was 150 bucks. There's a company called Zacuto that makes something that you could fit onto the bottom of this, but I wanted to be able to shoot this as a mirrorless camera, and by having this loop on the back of it, it made it easier for me to do so, and that's how I shot most of the images during this review. Another reason why I wanted to shoot this in live view mode more than shooting it in DSLR mode is you have full-time autofocus tracking even at 20 frames per second. So let me show you what that looks like over here in the computer. We've got this, just check this out right here. Watch the box. So the box locks onto the ball, it locks onto her face, tracks, boom, she passes, she gets the ball back, and you can see that it finds her face. And also where the autofocusing points are. Now, this wasn't super extreme. We've got more of that coming up. But the point is that for the most part, the DSLR clumps the focusing points in the middle. In this situation, the focusing points are outside of where the DSLR would have those points. So in the mirrorless mode, it's locking on the face automatically and seamlessly. Let me show you a picture over here that's a prime example of why this is important. Because I zoom in on her right here. She's off to the left-hand side of the frame. She's out of any area where a DSLR would have a focusing point. But because I shot it in the mirrorless mode, the focus was able to stay on her and get her in focus. Let me jump in here and remind you that I am doing the super huge mega camera giveaway once again, where one of you could win a camera valued up to $3,499 or lenses valued up to the same amount. All you need to do is head on over to bit.ly/megafro2020 to get entered for free. Now, if you purchase FroPack 1, FroPack 2, or the FroPack bundle, or you already own any of the FroPacks, you will score some extra entries. Now, once again, you do not need to make a purchase of FroPack 1, 2, or the bundle to win this contest. Now, let's get back to the video. All right, let's move back and play this clip out. So here she is. Let's see what she does. She drives the hole, it follows her, it tracks her all the way up. Now keep in mind, anytime you see footage that shows you the points moving, that means that I had to hold the camera out in front of me with an Atomos recorder on it, because that's the only way that we could record that so that you could see in action, in real time, the focus points moving. It's much more difficult to hold a camera out like this and try to track a subject. It's much easier when you put it up to your eye and you can do it, but we just can't do that with this camera. But I still wanted to show you the focusing system and how it worked. Now let's jump over to the next clip and watch this girl come up the court. So she's coming up the court, you've got the ref went by her, it loses her there, it locked onto the background, it missed, and there you go, it finally got back to her face, but it found her face from there. Let's see, I think she's gonna drive in, oh, she passes it off, and nothing else there. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But it is very good. And that's why I liked using this as a mirrorless camera versus using it as a DSLR. For the most part, it did a great job. Now let's jump over to another clip right here. Because watch this girl come up the floor. She is motoring and the focus stayed on her. Let's watch that again. She comes up the floor, boom, the focus has stayed on her. It kept up with her, so that just shows you how fast it is. And again, this is what we're looking at for the future. It tracked her really well. All right, let's take a look at another couple of images over here. This was actually done in the DSLR mode, and it did a good job because she is outside of that DSLR area, but the colors, the tones, the sharpness looks great, even at 6400 ISO, as it should. Because if this is 6400, maybe in the old camera, it's like shooting at 3200. So I have no problem shooting this pro camera at that high ISO to get the faster shutter speed to freeze the action. But the colors and clarity look really nice on this one. All right, moving on to the next photo. Just another cool moment captured. Now we're at 5000 ISO at 1/1600th of a second. And I do want to make this point. There is nothing wrong with a DSLR because a bunch of people are going to be like, oh, but how did we shoot in the past if we didn't have this newfangled technology? Well, that's honestly not the point because we do have the new technology. It's like saying that back in the day you only shot one frame at a time. Yeah, but that wasn't the original way of shooting either. A daguerreotype is a picture that took 30 minutes, like 3 hours to expose. And then technology starts to change. Now you went from wet plates to dry plates and you could take more photos. So as technology changes, you adapt. And there's nothing wrong with embracing technology to help you get images that you otherwise would never have gotten if you were shooting with the older technology. Now back to the clips over here. Let's see what we have next. Just following Ashley Jones right here. It stayed on her even though somebody ran in front. So it's pretty good locked on. And remember, as I move, it makes it harder to stay stable. So let's watch it one more time. When it turns to a white box, that means that I've taken my finger off of the shutter. And then you lose it. But what's actually pretty cool is if I need to quickly move the focusing point to where I need it to go, the new smart controller on the back, you just wave your thumb over it and it moves the focusing point right where you need it to go quickly and seamlessly. It's very similar to when they came out with the EOS R and they had that stupid touch bar on the back that I looked at and said, this is the dumbest thing ever because it doesn't have any function to it. I was like, why couldn't you just give us a small square to put our thumb on it to move focusing points with touch sensitivity? Well, they must have listened to me. It's all me. Maybe they didn't listen to me, but they just got it because they came up with the smart controller, and the smart controller is something that I hope to see in future cameras, even though it doesn't look like it's going to be in the R5. All right, let's jump back to some of these clips. This one's interesting. Watch the basketball. Whoop! It followed the basketball. One more time. Whoop! One more time. Whoop! It followed the basketball. Now, you don't always want the lock-on tracking to find the basketball and go to the hoop. You want it on the subject, but just that you saw it not lag at all is a big deal. It just shows you how fast this camera is at tracking subjects. Now, you also need to keep in mind, this is a much larger camera, and that new Digic 10 processor, is it Digic 10 or Digic X, Stephen? X. Oh, it's X? Okay. Digic X processor is much more powerful, but it may not find its way into the smaller cameras like the EOS R5 and the R6. So will they be able to get a smaller processor in there to do as good of a job as this camera is doing? This camera is lighter than a 1DX Mark II by something like 90 grams, but it's still a heavy camera. It also has a larger battery than you will find in, say, the A9 II, because it uses a similar sized battery that you would have found in the older DSLRs that Canon has put out. You will get a ton of shooting out of it, even when you're shooting this as a mirrorless camera. It's going to use a lot more power, but you have a bigger battery, so it lasts a heck of a lot longer. Let me jump in here and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I use for jaredpolin.com by going to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto to get a 14-day free trial. And if you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. So do you want to see 20 frames per second mechanical shutter in action? Let's watch this clip. Locks in on her. Oh, let me show you something else. Right up here in the top left, you've got 3137. That's the counter. That's how many shots I have left. Just watch as it just tracks down. It's going. This is 168 photos in a row. Now, it's not extreme focusing, but where she is in the screen, in the frame, would never be able to focus. We would never be able to focus on her with the DSLR without recomposing, because it's outside of that area of those focusing points. Let's watch this one more time. Here she goes, coming up the floor, 168 photos in a row, and then I've got 2 points to make that are super important. The first one is we never outran the buffer. Did you see how quick it went back to 99? You never will outrun this buffer. You could shoot thousands of RAW files in a row and never fill up your card or fill up the buffer of this camera, because they use dual CF Express cards. They are super fast, and I love using them because you never outrun it. And the second point is, just because you can shoot at 20 frames per second means you're not gonna shoot 168 in a row all the time. I would never sit there and shoot 168 photos in a row unless I'm testing it to show you guys to see how it worked out. Now, you may be saying, how many files are out of focus of those 168? And 11. 11 of them weren't sharp or in focus. They were slightly out. They weren't totally out, and they were in clusters, like a cluster of 4, a cluster of 3, a cluster of 4, and whatever got us to 11, 8, 9, 10, well, yeah, it was a cluster of 4, a cluster of 4, and a cluster of 3, and those were the only ones out in 168 photos in a row. Now, the point of shooting with 20 frames per second is not to hold your finger down and take 8 million photos and pray that you get what you need to get. It's about those quick bursts. It's about 3, 4, 5, 6 shots in a row, even 8 at this point, like that you get the action so that you can go in there and pick that moment. That's not cheating to me. That's using the technology at our fingertips to get photos that we otherwise would have missed with older specs and older tech. In fact, let me just show you what 20 frames per second looks like, or sounds like. You ready? This is 20 frames per second with the mirror flipped out of the way with the mechanical shutter. Is that the phone? Canon? I'm sorry I wasted the shutter actuations on your camera. I'll stop doing it. Not! But seriously, that is a lot of frames in a row. It's about the quick burst. You ready? Here's the action. Locks on the subject. Boom. That was like 6 shots right there. Let me show you this clip so you can see exactly what I'm talking about outrunning a buffer. On the left, we've got the Canon 1DX Mark III. On the right, we have the Sony A9 II. You can see that they both track very well, but keep an eye at where just watch this. We stop on the left-hand side, and you can see that the buffer has nothing in it. It's at 99. Now on the right, you can see there's 35 images. Oh Jesus, it's now 60 some images being written to the card. You're just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. We're still waiting. You get the point. It's still writing down. This is literally how long it takes to write those photos to the card. Now, again, this was extreme, taking like 100 pictures in a row, but it just shows you how slow it is to write to SD cards in a pro camera versus how to write to CF Express cards in a pro camera. Now, my voice got deeper there because this is a pro camera. It's built Ford, Tesla, Cybertruck tough versus the A9 II, which is more like a, hi, I'm a camera that can be really good for the most part and all, but now I'm afraid of the Cybertruck. What I will tell you is this is a brick of a camera in your hands. It's big, it's got a built-in grip where the A9 II doesn't, but you can add a grip to the A9 II. I prefer shooting the A9 II up to my eye because it has an electronic viewfinder and it makes it much easier to shoot, but with the Hoodman loop on the back of this, it wasn't as bad. Now, that's not telling you that it's better to shoot a DSLR in mirrorless mode this way. I would have preferred that they ripped the mirror out of this and never allowed it to be a DSLR, but it's not. But it's competent as a mirrorless camera. Now, who here wants to go into silent mode shooting 20 frames per second? Oh, me, I do. Okay, here we go. Now you can see that I'm changing it to electronic mode to shoot continuous 20 frames a second, and you can see the box. Anytime I take a picture, you see the white box around the outside. So let's show you that again. So when you take a picture, you don't feel anything, but boom, 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 white box, she goes up for the shot, she nails it, the focus finds her. We're gonna jump into the computer or the iPad, and we'll show you this is it in silent. No flickering, no issues, perfectly sharp, right on her eye, and top to bottom in focus. Like, this is not cropped. You're not getting focus on the eye with a DSLR. That's why I shot this thing as a mirrorless camera, because I love mirrorless cameras. The next clip that I have teed up for you is following a dance team person, not a cheerleader. This was to show you the continuous autofocus moving. I'm shooting silent, a couple of pictures here and there, but just watch as the pom-poms, yes, there it found her face, there it found the pom-poms, and it stayed, and there it missed and just went to this girl on the left. So you can see what's happening here. It's losing it to the pom-pom. Now, I was in case 1 for this, which is the catch-all case for lock-on tracking. For some of the sports stuff, I went in and I tweaked it myself for action sports, but it does a pretty good job. It just gets distracted by, well, distractions, because that's what happens. So you can see her just dancing, bopping up in the air, but you can see how quickly it just stays on the subject, and when it loses focus, it will jump back, and you do have that opportunity to focus on her again. Same thing, if you lose focus and you take your finger off the button, you can use that smart thing on the back to move the focusing point to tell the system where you want it to look. But it did a fairly good job. Okay, so let's move back here and show you some more basketball photos. We've got Ashley Jones going to the basket, sharp, tracked her the whole way, nice colors, nice tones, 5000 ISO. In another game, I went underneath the basket to shoot with the 11-24 f4. Now that's the thing is, I still have some EF glass, a 70-200 2.8, the 24-70 2.8. I believe Steven also has a 51.2 and an 85.1.2, and also we bought here at the studio an 11-24 years ago for situations just like this, right underneath the basket. It was great. The focus did find the subject. Now, it was more like bouncing around to a bunch of different subjects, but at least it found the subject in the frame, because when you're shooting this wide, it's going to all basically be in focus, and it just shows you that you can get the 11-24 and shoot nice and wide underneath the basket. Here we have a no, this is an actual cheerleader, not one of the dance team people. Nice and sharp on her. She is super duper in focus, 5000 ISO. The skin tones, the colors look great. The background out of focus. The bokeh is obviously part of the 70-200. But I'm really happy with the results that I was able to get out of this camera. Let me cut in here and let you know that the images that you're seeing on the screen right now were taken with the 1DX Mark III and edited using FroPack 2. If you're looking to speed up your raw workflow or give yourself a great starting point, we created 15 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack2. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you'd like to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale for a limited amount of time. Or you can save even more when you pick up the FroPack bundle, which consists of FroPack 1 and FroPack 2. Now, let's get back to the video. Let's jump back in the computer and put the Canon against the Sony once again. Which one is the Canon over here, Steven? Are you sure it's the one that says Canon? Yeah, that's right. That's why it says Canon. So let's watch this short clip because I wanted to show you side by side what we got. We're at 1/1600th of a second at 2.8, ISO 5000. Before I show you that, let me explain to you how Steven and I did this. Steven had an Atomos recorder on top of his A9 II. I had an Atomos recorder on top of this 1DX Mark III. We set the same exact settings. We both used a 70-200 2.8. We were sitting right next to each other on the sideline, telling each other, okay, we're gonna shoot vertical. I'm at 200 millimeters. We yelled it out so that we could try. We probably looked weird doing it, but we wanted to show you guys side by side as perfect as possible that we could get it in the real world to do a side-by-side comparison that's not shooting trash cans in the studio. So here it is. It wasn't easy, but we did it. So you can see he's shooting pictures, I'm shooting some pictures, and that's it. But you can watch as it tracks. Show you again. Locked on the faces, boom, very similar framing, keeps doing it. Finds the face again on both sides, and there's the photos that we got. So we have two photos we can put side by side. They're not at the exact same time because the only way for us to do two at the same time would be if I had a remote. Why didn't we think of that, Steven? Why didn't we think of bringing a remote and you would just hold it looking like you're doing it, and then I would press it and it would... Whatever, that's complicated. But if you look at both of them, it is very difficult to sit here and try to pick out which one is which between the Sony and the Canon. They both did a very nice job. Now keep in mind, one's a DSLR and one is a full-blown mirrorless camera, but the other, the 1DX Mark III, can masquerade as a mirrorless camera. Now I'm not telling anybody that has the Sony right now to run out and switch over to Canon because they shouldn't. But somebody who has a 1DX Mark II and wants to take advantage of the capabilities of a 1DX Mark III, more so for the mirrorless capability, and they don't want to go to RF glass and the EOS R or wait till whatever the Pro model is whenever that comes out, this could be a nice $6,500 option for them. But if they're pros, they get a lot of power out of this camera. Now we have the cheerleader, Canon on the left, Sony on the right. Oh, sorry, she's a dance team person. They both struggle in very similar places. They get thrown off by the pom-poms. They do lock back onto the face. Now she's in one place. She's not bouncing around as much as the next scene. The next scene brings us true dancing on the dancer. I mean, look how fast she's moving. Canon on the left, Sony on the right. The Sony looks like it's having a little bit of trouble. Oop, we lost it, and then he goes back and he finds it again. There he goes. You can see Steven moving the focusing point, which is much slower to move on an A9 II because the joystick is just much slower than just waving your finger over that smart directional controller thing. But you can see that they both do a fairly good job right here tracking this subject, even when distractions go across the frame. I was silent for a reason, everybody. I just wanted to let you watch it and let it play out without me interrupting. So let's look at these pictures. We've got the Sony, we've got the Canon. When we zoom in on the feet of the Canon one, you can see that they're both sharp. There's no motion here. On the Sony side, you can see that they are a little more blurry. But a lot of that depends on where the focusing points were at that particular time. It's not easy to get the same shot with two cameras at the same exact time. So there's probably some where the Canon did better, and there's probably others where the Sony did better, but they are very similar. There's slight differences in skin tone, but the focusing points did find the face on both of them, and they are very similar, which is why I made that a warning to Sony video, because they need to watch out, because Canon is coming with this technology that is proven already inside of this camera. And then I just really like this photo. It was nice composition, really sharp on her at 5000 ISO. Like I said, really nice, really clean. I like the colors, I like the tones. I'm happy with the files that I'm getting. Speaking of high ISO, I didn't get to push it to the extremes in the real world, so Steven went ahead and set up a little test up at my desk to put both of these cameras on the same tripod-y thing with a bar and connected so that they would be in the same spot at 35 millimeters each. We shot at 6400 ISO, 12,800, and 25,600 side by side. And honestly, it's very difficult to determine which one is better, if any of them are better at all. It's possible at the 25,600 area that the Canon may have a slight edge. It's newer sensor. It's just very difficult to say which one is better. You can download those RAW files and take a look at them for yourself, and you can determine which ones are better. So since we showed you higher ISOs indoors shooting sports, and this is primarily a sports/photojournalistic type camera, I wanted to go outside and photograph in much better lighting, and luckily there was a lacrosse game going on and it wasn't too cold. So now I got to shoot at 100 ISO, which is base ISO, using a 400 2.8 that was a 15-plus-year-old 400 2.8 IS, which is an older lens, so it's not going to be as critically sharp as the newer models. Keep in mind, it's a 15-plus-year-old lens, but it got the job done and tracked extremely well. Let's start off with this clip right here. You can see that I'm at 1/4000th of a second, 2.8, 100 ISO. I did get into case sensitivity number 2, and I tweaked it just a little bit to try and stay stuck longer on the subject and not get distracted by other distractions. Here we go. Coming up the field, I find her, oh, and let me show you once again how I had to hold the camera. I was on a monopod with the 1DX Mark III, with a 400 2.8, with an Atomos Ninja 5 recorder, and trying to keep a subject in there, whether I'm shooting vertical or horizontal, is not as easy if you are looking through the camera. So keep that in mind, that if you see a little bit of a shaky viewfinder, that's because I'm not looking through the camera, because we wanted to record everything that the viewfinder saw so you can see all the tracking in action. Oop, misses and then finds her, and then she passes it, and that's it. Let's watch that once again. Comes up the field, it finds her from a distance pretty well. Then you can see when multiple boxes show up, that means it can't find like the face, so it just thinks I'm gonna focus there. It bumps to the background, but then quickly reacquires her until she passes it and shoots the whole time. Now, what's interesting is that you have 20 frames per second mechanical, and you have the 20 frames per second silent. 90-some% of the time, you will not need to shoot silent. So that is one of the bonuses with the Sony, is that it shoots silent 20 frames per second all the time if you're in compressed. But if you don't need to shoot silent, why not just use the shutter? It gives you the option at 20, and it's not compressed raw. So that is one of the things I love about this camera. Let me cut in here real quick and ask you, would you like to take better pictures in low light situations? If you said yes, just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, and I will send you that guide for free. Next clip, oop, this girl comes in, boom! Holy Jesus, let's watch that again. I would love to do it in slow motion, but I don't know how to do that here. Here she goes, I'll just talk it slowly. She comes up and boom, 18 puts the boom down on her. Let's try that again. Okay, we're gonna go slower. 15 does a spinorama. She utilizes the C button. She keeps running, she's moving upfield. Out of nowhere, 18 cross-checks her right in the kidneys, and she loses the ball, and that was a good defensive play. That was all in focus because lock-on tracking worked. Now let's jump into some photos. Now they may not be from the scene that we were just seeing, but I just want to show you exactly what we were able to get here. Lock on right to number, well, she might be number 15 or 19. Well, she wasn't 15 because 15 just got laid out. Next, we've got the girl coming up the field, super duper sharp. Awesome lock-on tracking. Like I said, I love using this camera as a mirrorless camera more than a DSLR because it allowed me to get things I otherwise would not have gotten if I was just shooting with a DSLR. That's not to tell you or not to say that you can't do it with a DSLR, because of course you can get great results. That's how we've done it in the past for a long amount of time. But I love seeing the focusing box. It just makes me feel better and more warm and hunky-dory inside. See how sharp this girl is? Wow, she got blue eyes. I think I can see that coming up the field. Another really nice shot right there. Ooh, I gotta show you this clip. You guys have to see this clip to believe it. Roll the clip, Jared. She goes, she switches hands, she throws it, and by throws it, I mean she shoots it and she scores. And then she dropped her stick, her lacrosse stick. Show you that again, because watch as the focusing point. We're gonna go step by step here, frame by frame. There it lost her and went to number 15, who tries to knock her with the stick and misses. Then it reacquires her and finds her face for a split second before going to 18, who loves cross-checking people in the kidneys. That's not good. She still gets the shot off, and she scores. Now, if she's on the same plane as 18, then she should be in focus. The first one, she's in focus right here because it fully found her face. This is the one where it locked on to 18, and it's a little more subtle. I think she is slightly, ever so slightly out. Now, part of that is because this is a much older lens. It's not as critically sharp as a newer lens would have been, but not every shoot can be done with a brand new lens. It's still good enough. If they were to put this on the internet, put this on Instagram, even blow it up to a certain point, it would still be good enough. It's just showing you that the focus locked onto the wrong person in this situation and didn't stay on the girl who ended up scoring. Let's run some more clips on the outside here. How quickly it acquires her. No distractions, makes it much easier. There you go. Quickly find that girl who passes it back to 20. 20 passes it to somebody else. And then now it's just a mishmash that it's not going to focus because there was nothing really for it to focus on. Following clip, this girl coming up the side, it loses her, reacquires her quickly, which is great. Took my finger off the button, and then she runs back towards defense. Now we've got this girl coming up the field, gets her right there. She's flying too, she's motoring, gets it to 10, filling the frame all the way, and locks on her face as she starts to go behind the net. So here we go. We've got, well, this isn't the same girl coming up the field, but 31, she's nice and in focus right there. 14 right here. Look at the nice background blowing out, but that's not the camera, that's more of the lens. Then we've got the girl running up the field. She's making that pass. Look how sharp her eyes are right there. I don't know why they wear just face cages or eye cages. They should wear masks and they should wear gloves, in my opinion, is what they should do. And the last and final clip that we have from the field, just tracking this girl vertically. Boom, boom, boom. Take a couple of pictures, wobble around a little bit, and here's that photo. She is super sharp. She is nice. The colors look great. Of course, at 100 ISO, it's going to be amazing. I loved shooting the Lacross game. Not easy to shoot. I needed a 400 2.8, and I have to thank Zamani for allowing me to borrow one of his backup 400 2.8s. I know we've been making a lot of longer review videos, but I shot for like 4 days. 3 basketball games, a lacrosse game. There's a lot of different situations and scenarios to run these things through, and it takes time. That's why it takes time to shoot this stuff. And remember, it's not just shoot it, it's prepare the stuff to make this video here, and then we have to go and edit everything before we can get it out into the real world. Now, I do want to remind you that you can download sample RAW files as well as full exported JPEGs so that you can line them up and pixel peep to your heart's content. And now it's time for the most important test, and that's the sniff test. Bell Dar Conehead. Yep, that's right. That's a winning smell right there. And the second most important test, the Windtunnel test. That's real air coming out, guys. That was a really impressive blow capability of blowing right there. It passed with flying colors. So this is a $6,500 DSLR, and DSLRs are dead in my book. This as a mirrorless camera is pretty usable. To anybody out there with a 1DX Mark II that is shooting full time and wants to shoot 20 frames per second, and the newspaper or magazine can buy it for you, or you can buy it yourself, I think this is a worthy upgrade for you for the time being. But if Canon had the balls to make this a full-on mirrorless camera with an RF mount that shoots 20 frames per second mechanical, 20 frames per second silent, they would have blown the well, they already blew the D6. The D6, they blew it out of the water because the D6, Nikon spent no time talking about its mirrorless capabilities. We don't even know what those mirrorless capabilities are really gonna be because they didn't spend any time talking about it, which leads me to believe they just focused on it as a DSLR, which is gonna put them even further behind. If Canon can quickly get out a mirrorless version of this 1DX Mark III, they're going to start to give Sony a run for their money, especially with having RF glass. Nikon, on the other hand, we don't really know what they're up to when it comes to the mirrorless world. I'm happy with the results that I got. The quality, the high ISO capability. I could take this camera out into the real world today and get better results, in my opinion, than I would with a DSLR. Because it always comes down to that one it is a DSLR, but I mean shooting it in mirrorless mode. It comes down to that statement that I constantly hammer home. Am I capable of capturing images with this that I would not be able to capture with something else? Does it allow me to do that? And this camera in mirrorless mode does allow me to do things better than I could have done them with a DSLR-only camera. I do want to finish this up and tell you that this is one of the greatest, if not the greatest DSLRs ever made, and it's going to have a short life, and this will be the last of the greatest DSLRs. What they did with this camera is fantastic. The fact that they built in so many mirrorless options and functions tells us where they're going in the future, and the future is looking a hell of a lot brighter today than it looked a year and a half to 2 years ago from Canon. Sony needs to watch out. Nikon, I think they can get somewhere. They just need to get there pretty soon. So let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Leave them down below. Thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, hashtag #NarfleTheGarThug in the comment section so I know that you got this far. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.